Welcome back, folks. This one's a bit different. It's not really news reaction as much as impromptu history lesson. You can see here the last Doolittle Raider dies. Lieutenant Colonel Richard Dick Cole passes at 103. This man was 1 year younger than my grandfather would be this year. My grandfather was a military policeman during World War II, stationed in Italy. One of my great uncles was U.S. Navy, stationed in the North Sea. Another was tank commander in North Africa, then later at Normandy. A third great uncle died on 8 June 44 as a paratrooper during the Normandy invasion and when he was scattered. Lieutenant Colonel Cole was a Doolittle Raider. December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy. Naval and air forces from the Empire of Japan brutally attacked the naval station at Pearl Harbor. If you've seen the movie, it's pretty close. It was a horrific day. The Japanese Empire had for some time been pursuing peace talks with the U.S., sending peace medals and ambassadors and all sorts of things all over to the U.S. to convince us they were not a threat. Meanwhile, they were planning the attack. And on the 7th of December, a Sunday, if I remember right, the aviators and sailors at Pearl Harbor were woken to explosions and chaos. Pearl Harbor is a very shallow area, and if you've watched the movie, you'll see the reference to the little wooden bit they put on their torpedoes, which allows them to function in shallow water. The USS Arizona can't be brought up from the waters at Pearl Harbor safely. So countless sailors there are entombed in the waters in Hawaii. I can't think of a better place to be. I can't think of many better places to be buried, but I can't think of many good places at all to die, especially not the way they did. But after 1941, after that horrible day, Lieutenant, I'm sorry, it was, I believe he was Colonel James Doolittle, Jimmy Doolittle, formed the Doolittle Raiders. And they were basically taking Army bombers off of an aircraft carrier. You can watch the montage there where there's a line painted on the ground, and if you're not off the ground by the time that line hits, you're dead. That's really what would have had to happen because they're doing an extremely short runway takeoff. I don't know if the black broom handles for guns on the airplane is real. I don't know exactly how they did it, but they would have had to lighten that plane as much as possible, maybe sacrificing fuel, seats, navigation equipment, who knows what. And they got as close as they could and they took off. And shortly after, Fat Man and Little Boy hit Hiroshima and Nagasaki, taking the fight out of the Japanese. China at the time was an ally and pretty much where we could land, and a lot of the raiders did make it home. You can see one here who made it home to live 70 more years almost. This is a raid that there was no one in the military who thought there was an inkling of a chance for this to succeed. But Doolittle believed it could and made it happen. Colonel Cole is testament to that. He and the other aviators, Doolittle, all of them, proved that when the chips are down, Americans find a way to rise. And we're losing more and more of the greatest generation every day. I spoke of my own family. My grandfather, born a little early for World War II, he would have been 26, 27 when drafted, but he was a military policeman in Italy for the entirety of World War II for our boys. Coleman was the tank commander. He fought Rommel in North Africa, brought home a bullet from those fights, ultimately made it to, I believe it was Portsmouth, may have been Dover, and rode with Patton's army to Normandy, Omaha Beach to be exact. Brought home a bullet in the other leg from that encounter. And I have recently reread some of the reports, and I have been mistaken when I was speaking in some scenarios. My great uncle Coleman did not ride into Auschwitz. That was the Red Army. He would have ridden into Buchenwald. Also rode through the streets of Paris as it was liberated. I believe it was my great uncle Raymond, who was in the Navy. It was either it was Raymond. Roland was the one who died on the 8th of June as the paratrooper. Raymond was North Sea in the Navy. His ship, not sure if he was a submariner or just on a ship, but it was hit by a torpedo that did not detonate. One of my cousins, distant cousins, actually has a piece of that because it was rendered completely safe and chopped up, and everybody kept peace. And I got to sit with my great uncle Coleman in 1994, my senior year of high school, and I just prodded with short little questions about his time during World War II. He actually doesn't remember much of the Depression of the 30s because he was a very small child, and then preteen, right up to Pearl Harbor when he would have been drafted. But he started off telling stories about basic training and just the routine there. Stories about being at other bases where, you want to get a picture of you and all your buddies. So one guy has to have the camera, or did at the time, and you keep telling him, no, back up more, back up more, back up more, until he falls into the hole that used to be the latrine. But then you see his face change when he gets to North Africa. You see the light fade a bit, and you see a different light in his eye as he talks about being a young man thrown into war against arguably one of the greatest tacticians the world has seen in the last 100 years, General Erwin Rommel. There are stories about Rommel and his tactics, but also stories where he would come on an Allied military hospital and do nothing but maybe leave some supplies. Rommel was a true warrior. He was not a fanatic, but he was very good at what he did. And my uncle carried a bullet for 50 years because of that. Then he talks about D-Day. And I can tell you just a few years later when I saw Saving Private Ryan, it was a year or two after we lost Coleman. I couldn't watch the opening scene. I knew what was coming. I knew what was coming when I saw the landing craft. And when I saw that first instant when the doors opened, I had to leave. I had to leave until I heard the music and the tone change, and then I could go back because my great uncle was there when that happened. He brought a bullet home in his leg from that. It's something that is very hard to explain. I was a firefighter for several years. I'm thankful every day I never lost a victim. Thankful every day I never lost a brother or sister on a call. I was a volunteer firefighter in a very small town. I mean, with the exception of a couple of car accidents and another one or two other little things, the vast majority of calls I went on, we took out the brush truck, which is a flatbed Ford with a gigantic water tank and glorified garden hoses on it. And we would roll down the side alongside railroad tracks, spraying out tiny little fires that they had caused when they broke too hard. So I don't see movies like Backdraft or shows like Chicago Fire and get overly emotional because I've not lived that. But hearing firsthand from someone who did, and then watching it just hit me. I wish with everything I had or have. I'd known about Lieutenant Colonel Cole several years ago when I graduated college because I would have taken vacation time and I would have driven and I would have gone down to meet him and take him some iced tea and sit and talk about his time on this earth. Everything, not just his military time, because these are people who have lived history, and we're losing them at an unprecedented rate today. I will link this in the description, but I'm going to break from my normal template because there's only other one link I'm going to post, and it's to the Gary Sinise Foundation. Uh, well, two links, both to him. One to his foundation, one to Soaring Valor. Soaring Valor takes World War II veterans to the official National World War II Museum in Louisiana, somewhere I hope to take my nephew very soon. It's just something I think he would like to see, as he does enjoy history as I do. I don't want this to be a downer. These men went and fought. The Doolittle mission was 100% volunteer. And this man came home and had a long life. I mean, for crying out loud, this is 74 years from D-Day in a couple of months. And he would have been responding to Pearl Harbor 4 years before that. So he came home and had 70 years and lived a good life from all I can see, which I'm glad to see. But don't forget that there are people out there who have lived the history that you were taught in high school. And don't dismiss them when they tell you, that's wrong. Who taught you that? Because you're taught something in school that, and then they tell you, no, I lived through that. Here's what really happened. Learn from those who've seen it. I tell it to people when I talk to them and when I walk, like when I go through my office and my boss sees me regularly stop at least once a week, if not twice, at every fire extinguisher. And I've reported several in the last, oh dear Lord, 7 years, at both offices we've been in, when I see them get out of green. Because if the meter is not, if the dial, if the pressure gauge is not in the green, you can't rely on that fire extinguisher to do its job. I watch for things like that because I've been a firefighter and it's just part of me. I've already told all of the people in management in my office, because we have a team that is tasked with ensuring the building is evacuated. And I tell them every time we do a fire drill, because I can smell smoke very quickly. I know when it's a drill and when it's not. And I told my boss just a week or two ago when we had one, I said, you know, if it's not a drill, you're going to be writing me up for not leaving the building, because it's not in my DNA to leave the building when there may be a victim inside. And he said, I'll have to write you up. I said, you know what, I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. And he just smiled at me, and pretty soon I may be wrangled into being on that team. But you see it with every profession. People who live through something others don't have a unique perspective. I have a very specific way I have an emergency kit packed. Certain things in certain order, in certain ways. Cops do it different. Colonel Cole would have done it different as well. So don't forget, we're losing history as we go through, and this is a time when we really need to remember our history. I've talked long enough on this one. There's really not much to comment on here. Lieutenant Colonel Cole has passed the Rainbow Bridge into Valhalla. He's earned his reward. There's an old saying, when he gets to heaven, St. Peter he will tell, another soldier reporting, sir, I've done my time in hell. And to Lieutenant Colonel Cole, I would say, we have the watch. He's earned his rest. But he's also earned a world that won't crap on his legacy. We need to be worthy of the legacy that men like Lieutenant Colonel Cole and the men and women who served with him left for us. They fought, many died, to defeat a tyrant. And we have people today who are taught incorrectly about that, about all sorts of things. And it's frightening. But tell your stories in the comments. Who have you met that you would like to tell us about? Of course, as always, please like the video. Please make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, because you never know what I may or may not post. I have my scheduled stuff, but things come up, and I have to talk. Until next time, though, everyone have a wonderful day.